Good afternoon, Vice-Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research and Sustainable Futures, Dean and Deputy Dean of Graduate Research, distinguished guests, finalists, members and friends of the University of Wollongong community. Welcome to the 2023 virtual UOW 3-Minute Thesis Final. My name is Emily Keogh. I'm the Acting Coordinator of the Training and Development Team at the Graduate Research School, and it's my great pleasure to be your MC today. Before we begin with today's proceedings, we would like to start the event with an acknowledgement of country video produced by Wollongong Indigenous Centre here at the University of Wollongong.
That country for Aboriginal peoples is an interconnected set of ancient and sophisticated relationships.
The University of Wollongong spreads across many interrelated Aboriginal countries that are bound by their sacred landscape, an intimate relationship with that landscape since creation.
From Sydney to the Southern Highlands to the South Coast. Freshwater, to bitter water, to salt. From city to urban to rural.
The University of Wollongong acknowledges the custodianship of the Aboriginal peoples of this place and space that has kept alive the relationships between all living things.
The university acknowledges the devastating impact of colonisation on our campus's footprint,
and commit ourselves to truth-telling, healing and education.
Fantastic. It wouldn't be a real virtual event if something didn't go wrong early on. But I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all live and work, and pay my deep respects to elders past and present. I extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are watching today. The 3-Minute Thesis competition celebrates the exciting research conducted by Doctor of Philosophy students. Developed by the University of Queensland, 3MT cultivates students' academic, presentation and research communication skills. The competition supports their capacity to effectively explain their research in a language appropriate to a non-specialist audience. An 80,000-word PhD thesis would take 9 hours to present. Our candidates have just 3 minutes. Before we get into the event, I thought it would be interesting to explain where the idea of 3MT came from. You might recall in early 2000s, many parts of Australia were experiencing a severe drought, and to conserve water, residents were encouraged to limit their showers, and many people had 3-minute egg timers fixed to the walls of their bathrooms. The then Dean of Graduate School at the University of Queensland, Emeritus Professor Alan Lawson, put 2 and 2 together, and the idea for the 3MT competition was born. The first 3MT competition was held at the University of Queensland in 2008, with 160 higher degree research candidates competing. In 2020, 3MT moved to a temporary virtual format due to COVID-19, and has continued to be held around the world. In fact, 3MT today is held in over 900 universities across more than 85 countries worldwide. The winner of each of these university competitions, as well as the winner of the UOW final today, will go on to compete in the 2023 Asia Pacific competition, with the final to be held virtually on the 18th of October. It's now with great pleasure that I introduce Professor Patricia Davidson, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Wollongong, to say a few words.
Thanks so much, Emily, and good afternoon, everyone. My colleagues, importantly, our higher degree research students, distinguished guests, and importantly, a huge congratulations to our finalists here today. But I'd also like to thank all of the students who have taken part in the various heats across the university. And today we celebrate our finalists. You've done a remarkable job of getting to the final. This event is one of the highlights of the University of Wollongong research calendar, and it's personally an event that I love being part of. I had the privilege of being on the judging panel last year, and I know we're going to have a great afternoon ahead of us, learning a lot about science. We know the University of Wollongong is a global leader in discovery and learning, and we've been really excited this year to see an uplift in our rankings, and we're now ranked 162nd in the world, and that's pretty good for a very young university. And we know our high degree research students and their research outputs have contributed to the research strength of our university. I think here at the University of Wollongong, our phenomenal faculty and resources and staff create a wonderful ecosystem for students to innovate, create, and change the world. The ability to present very complex items and knowledge is a real challenge. And can I tell you, in my job as Vice-Chancellor, it is a really important skill to learn. This afternoon I'm doing a media event, and I've had to sort of do a crash course on silicon batteries and high SATA. And so this is an excellent skill that's going to take you into all areas of your career. And I think importantly, we've seen with the proliferation of disinformation and misinformation, excuse me, just 1 minute, the clear importance of our community being able to access credible information. So the 3-minute thesis competition is an excellent opportunity for you to not just learn this skill, but to cheer on your colleagues and have fun along the way. So thanks so much, Emily, sorry, I've got a frog in my throat, for your wonderful organisation, and to Simon and the whole team. And I look forward to the presentations ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vice-Chancellor, for that warm welcome and those encouraging words. The UOW final is an exciting culmination of faculty heats, and it's now my great pleasure to introduce to you our 10 finalists who were chosen from each of our 5 faculties and institutes. From the Australian Institute of Innovative Materials, Suukshan Marks and Jiny Joseph. From the Faculty of the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities, Claire Rushton and Runji Chung. From the Faculty of Business and Law, Yue Sun and Randa Sassadin. From the Faculty of Business and Law, from the Faculty of Engineering and Information Sciences, Molly Kirkpatrick and Jun Yin. And from the Faculty of Science, Medicine and Health, Cassandra Ng and Kirsten Parker. I want to congratulate all of our finalists on your work so far and wish you the very, very best today. The presentations will be judged by a panel of experts with a range of expertise and experiences across different disciplines. Joining us today is Professor Patricia Davidson, the Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of Wollongong, and a global leader in cardiac health and health education. Professor David Caro, Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research and Sustainable Futures, and an esteemed researcher in cancer control and health services research. Professor Simon Moss, Dean of Graduate Research and champion of UOW HTR candidates. Professor Honglin Chen, Deputy Dean of Graduate Research, leader and master in HTR candidate and HTR supervisor training. Professor Nina Reynolds, Chair of Academic Senate and Professor of Marketing in the Faculty of Business and Law. Mr. Alex Taylor Bartels, our representative from HySARA and this year's major sponsor. And finally, the winner of the 2022 UOW 3MT competition, Ms. Sarah Vogel, PhD candidate in the Faculty of Science, Medicine and Health, and a postgraduate research award scholar with the Australian Institute of Nuclear Science and Engineering. In a short while, we will play their pre-recorded presentations. Competitors will not be judged on the video recording quality or editing capabilities. Our judging will focus on the presentation slide and the ability to communicate complex research in an interesting, accessible, and compelling manner. There are two key components that will be judged today. First is the communication and content. Here, judges will be looking for the ability to pitch a carefully planned and easily understood exposition of a new idea, its significance, and its benefits. The second component is engagement and communication, the capacity to speak with passion and to capture the attention of the audience and keep us wanting to know more. Keep these criteria in mind as the audience members will have the opportunity to vote for the People's Choice Award at the end of this presentation. After each video presentation, one of the judges will make a comment and ask the candidate a question. The candidates will then respond. After the final presentation, our judges will enter a separate room to determine the overall winner of the UOW 3MT competition, as well as the runners-up. The 2023 UOW 3MT competition would not be possible without the support of a wonderful sponsor, HySARA, who have kindly agreed to donate $1,000 to today's overall winner. HySARA's mission is to accelerate the world's shift away from fossil fuels to green hydrogen by delivering the world's best electrolyzer. In fact, HySARA's electrolyzer is based on breakthrough Australian technology developed by a team from the University of Wollongong's ARC Centre of Excellence for Electromaterials Science, led by expert Professor Jerry Sweegers. We are incredibly proud and incredibly grateful to be partnering with HySARA. And before we go any further, I want to invite Mr. Alex Taylor Bartels, who will be joining our judging panel today, to say a few words.
Cheers. Thank you, Emily. And I hope I'm coming through okay. Thank you very much for inviting myself and HySARA to this competition today. I'm a graduate of Monash University, where I did a similar competition while I was studying there. So I know probably how nerve-wracking it is at the moment, but how sort of important these are to the university and to the students' careers. So as Emily mentioned, HySARA is a electrolyzer manufacturer. We're based in Wollongong and we're a spin-out of the University of Wollongong based on some research done by a few researchers and Jerry Sweegers. So to give you some context, an electrolyzer produces green hydrogen. So hydrogen is a zero emission source of energy that could be used to replace natural gas or coal in steel or in a car. And HySARA has done something pretty breakthrough by making that 20% more efficient than our next competitors. So what that means is billions of dollars in savings, but probably more importantly for people on this call, it means really cool technology, really fast scaling, and a startup culture. So HySARA is really proud to be sponsoring this event. We have a very strong relationship with the University of Wollongong, as well as its graduates. So if anybody's looking to work as an engineer or in data science or in anything of the sort, we will be scaling pretty rapidly over the next year, and that comes with a lot of labour required. So feel free to reach out to me afterwards if I can put you in front of the right person or try and get you a job. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you so much, Alex. And thank you for supporting our HDR candidates in their research. We're delighted to have such an expert judging panel. They have a very difficult job ahead of them deciding this year's 3MT winner. As mentioned, today's winner will receive a prize of $1,000 kindly donated by Cassandra, and the runners-up will receive $750. Following the presentation from the finalists, a QR code will be displayed on your screen. You, our audience, will be invited to vote for who you think gives the most convincing and engaging 3MT presentation. This person will win the People's Choice Award along with $750. The running order in which the finalists' research will be showcased has been drawn randomly. On to the presentations. Our first contestant is Molly Kirkpatrick. After graduating with bachelor's degrees, plural, in materials, engineering, and physics, Molly has continued following her childhood passion for space exploration into a PhD. In partnership with the CSIRO, her work focuses on developing measurement techniques and instruments that can be used to identify elements within lunar soil. This work is an essential first step for allowing humans to use lunar resources to create a sustained human presence on the moon. Molly will present one miniature sensor, creating big possibilities in space.
The cosmos have captured our imaginations since humans first looked into the skies and started questioning, is there anyone else out there? What would it be like to live on a different planet? And is the moon really made out of cheese? We are living in a time where we are finally able to get answers to these really complicated questions. For example, through chemical and elemental analysis, we've discovered that the dirt on the moon's surface, the regolith, is actually very similar to what we have here on Earth. And NASA's Artemis mission plans to not only send people back to the moon, but to set up a sustained human presence there within the next decade. One of the biggest problems they're facing is getting supplies to the astronauts on the moon. Shipping things there is really expensive. It can cost up to $1 million to get just 1 kilogram of material to the lunar surface. We are developing technologies to enable in situ resource utilization, which means let's use whatever material we have wherever we happen to be. Can we extract oxygen or water from the lunar regolith? Can we make bricks out of it? Can we use it to make fuel? Well, before we can actually do anything with this material, we need to know exactly what it is. What elements do we have to work with? As part of my PhD, I have developed a miniaturized X-ray fluorescence, or XRF, payload that weighs about 100 grams and can tell you just that. It works by shooting X-rays into the regolith. These X-rays are absorbed by the atoms in the soil and re-emitted at very specific energies. We can detect these emitted photons and determine not only what elements are present, but how much of each element we have. The sensor is shown here and is about 5 times lighter than any XRF instrument that has been sent to the lunar or Martian surface before. It contains all of the necessary electronics and software to run the sensor and analyze the results. The sensor has applications in 2 main areas. To explore areas on the lunar surface that have high concentrations of elements of interest, and for process control and monitoring. We can measure a material before and after it's been processed to determine if all of the valuable material has been extracted efficiently. This past year, I have used this sensor to measure changes in the concentration of ilmenite, a mineral that's found all over the lunar surface and can be used to generate oxygen. Current testing also indicates that this sensor can be used to monitor the carbothermal reduction of lunar regolith, which is one of the processes we can use to extract that oxygen. This tiny sensor is a small but mighty piece in the puzzle, making in situ resource utilization and a sustained human presence on the moon and beyond possible.
Thank you so much, Molly. I'd now like to invite Professor Patricia Davidson to ask a question for Molly.
Hi, Molly. What a great presentation. Is there any particular sort of hypothesis about new minerals or particular minerals that you might find as part of this process?
It's a very good question and a little bit out of my area of expertise. But so far, all of the minerals that we've found on the moon, obviously we've only been to, a few select locations, but all of the minerals that we've found have been things that exist already on Earth. So as far as I'm aware, and I'm not a geologist by any means, but as far as I'm aware, there aren't any new big surprises that they're expecting to find.
Thanks, Molly. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Molly. That was Molly Kirkpatrick from the Faculty of Engineering and Information Sciences. Our next contestant is Kirsten Parker. Kirsten is a registered nurse and a second-year PhD candidate at the University of Wollongong in the School of Nursing, and her current research focuses on the transfer from hospital to home for frail older adults. She's particularly interested in the role of the nurse in improving transitional care needs of these complex patients. Kirsten will present NavNurse, the new healthcare roadmap.
The healthcare system can be difficult to navigate. The transition from hospital to home is a particularly challenging route, especially for frail older adults. This vulnerable population group often get landed in hospital with no GPS, overwhelmed and disorientated, and far more likely to be readmitted soon after discharge. Now, what if there was someone in the hospital system dedicated to helping frail older adults make a safe and more effective transition back home? You know what? Making it almost as easy as traveling somewhere with your GPS. So forget about the nav man and say hello to the nav nurse. This nav nurse is a specialised clinician who fills a unique role in the Australian healthcare climate. They help support to get frail older adults home safely. Now, frailty is a clinically defined state of a decline in functional ability and an increase in vulnerability. In Sydney, 38% of frail older adults are readmitted to hospital or rehabilitation within just 3 months of being discharged. Now, frankly, this number is far too high. And in addition to causing avoidable stress for these patients, the strain on the healthcare system is significant, costing upwards of $1.5 billion every year. So you might be wondering, how can the NAV nurse address this? By helping frail older adults navigate the complex healthcare system of today. Now, to do this, we must first comprehensively understand its difficulties. I'm currently conducting interviews with patients and carers and focus groups with clinicians to better understand the gaps in care and the risky journey from hospital to home. I've already identified a number of needs that can be met by the NAV nurse. The next step in our research is a pilot feasibility trial, where the NAV nurse works within the hospital and organises a meeting to identify care needs with the patient and carer and team. They also link in relevant community services, for example, community nursing and communication with the GP. The NAV nurse then stays in contact for a few weeks after discharge with the patient and carer to ensure safety at home. Now, once we do this, we want to measure the impact on things like quality of life, anxiety and depression, and most importantly, hospital readmissions. This crucial data can help revolutionise transitional care pathways across Australia by both understanding and addressing the challenges faced by frail older adults. Now, we are all getting older and the ageing population is exponentially growing. This is not a new problem, but we just need to do it better. My research and the NAV nurse can ultimately be the resource that breaks this hazardous cycle of frequent readmissions and ultimately help keep frail older adults at home and healthier for longer.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. I'd now like to invite Professor David Caro to ask a question.
Thanks very much, Kirsten. Fantastic presentation and great work What was it that sparked your interest in really looking at the transition from hospital to home in frailer elderly adults?
Thank you for your question, Professor David Caro. Working as a nurse on the floor, I've seen the impact of poor transitional care and frequent readmissions it has on this vulnerable population group. And nurses are ultimately positioned as a great advocate for these vulnerable populations. So really working on the floor and seeing our vulnerable patients come back and forth, it ultimately drove me to thrive in transitional care.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
That was Kirsten from the Faculty of Science, Medicine and Health. Up next is Jun Yin. Jun Yin completed her Bachelor of Engineering honours in Materials Engineering at the University of Wollongong in 2021. Her honours thesis focused on applying electrochemical testing methods to examine the corrosion behaviour of steel products. She is currently working on her PhD project, which involves interdisciplinary research materials and biomedicine. The primary aim of this project is to modify the surface of titanium alloys using both physical and chemical methods for biomedical permanent implantation applications. Jun will present bioactive surface coatings, boosting the survival rate of permanent bone implants.
Human bone can be damaged as we age or an accident occurs, resulting in infection around the injured area or limited mobility. But this issue is no longer insurmountable. Certain metallic materials, especially the lightweight and 3D printable titanium alloys with a porous structure manufactured by 3D printing technologies, have been widely used for biomedical implantation applications, particularly for permanent implantation. The application of such 3D printed porous structures can mimic the internal structure and mechanical properties of a human bone. But they are not enough. The most important consideration in biomedical applications must be the biological response of implant. Are the biological responses on titanium alloy ideal for bone growth? Well, titanium alloys are bioinert, but not most ideal surface for a speedy bone integration, leaving a chance to bacteria to occupy their surface, which may cause implantation failure. Nowadays, the most straightforward and effective method to improve the bioactivity of titanium alloy is through the application of the bioactive surface coatings. Numerous coating systems have already been successfully deposited on titanium-based plate materials, demonstrating significant enhancement of the biological performance. However, the deposition of the uniform and intact coating on porous titanium alloy has proven challenging, owing to the complexity of such a porous structure and the limitation of the current coating technologies. Therefore, my PhD project is aiming to develop novel surface coating methods and routines that build up on the existing coating technologies. The objective is to deposit bioactive metal and compound coating system, such as tantalum and hydroxyapatite coating, onto the 3D printed porous titanium alloys. The coating achieved through this newly designed method exhibits excellent uniformity, integrity, and bonding strength to the base metal. As a consequence, the attachment of the bone-forming cell to such coated porous titanium alloy can be facilitated. Those cells will then grow on or even in the porous structure, promoting the formation of the permanent bone cells, enhancing the long-term stability of the implant, effectively delaying the implantation failure and even the revision surgery.
Thank you very much, Jun. I'd now like to invite Professor Simon Moss to ask a question.
Thank you, Emily. That was brilliant, Jun. And it was so clear. I feel like in 3 minutes, I've become now an expert in titanium alloys. But I suppose I'm interested because it was so convincing that I'm thinking about What do you think might be the main challenge for maybe applying titanium alloys to support bones in the future? Or do you think it's actually going to be quite straightforward?
Yeah, I think the bit challenging is like the titanium doesn't have the good enough bio properties for the subsequent bone integration, although it's a widely used biomaterial in the market, but still can have some limitation that need to be improved. If we can modify the surface of the titanium to the very bioactive one, maybe we can avoid some revision surgery after a few years being implanted into the human body. Thank you.
Excellent. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Thanks.
Fantastic answer. Good job. That was Jun Yin from the Faculty of Engineering and Information Sciences. Our next contestant is Claire Rushton. Claire is a psychologist on the clinical registrar, currently providing psychological therapy to adults and adolescents with a range of mental health difficulties. Claire's PhD investigates the experiences of families and friends who are affected by a loved one's alcohol or other drug use, including the impact and burden, their coping strategies, and how to effectively address family needs through the intersection of research and clinical practice. She will present on families affected by alcohol and other drug use.
Now, we all know that substance use research is a hot topic. We've seen the ads, read the warnings on the bottles, and we've all got a pretty good idea about the impact that drinking and drug use can have on our health. We also know that many people need support to help manage these addictive behaviours. But alongside every person with alcohol or drug use difficulties is a parent, a sibling, a friend, maybe a partner and a child, all of whom are deeply worried about their loved one. Are they going to be drunk or high when I get home? How much debt are we in? Have they had a run-in with the law? Or are they dead? In my work as a psychologist in alcohol and drug services, I often hear families speak about the constant worry, anger, the fears for their safety, and this feeling of unpredictability, like walking on eggshells, while just trying to get on with their day-to-day life. And underneath all of this is the guilt and shame. I failed. This is my fault. So while we need to continue improving services for people who use drugs, it's become really clear to me that families experience significant and enduring harms to their mental and physical well-being, and they've largely been neglected from services and support. Theories like codependency suggest that the family is part of the problem, and this adds to the stigma and shame and really stops families from reaching out for help. And what about those people who do seek help? So I conducted a systematic review looking at the effectiveness of treatments for families independent of the person that uses drugs or alcohol. And the good news is that treatments seem to work. I found reductions in depression and distress and increases in coping skills among families after participation in either a group or a one-on-one treatment program. However, the research conducted to date is very limited. Australian research is particularly scarce. It also predominantly focuses on the ways that families have suffered, rather than looking at how best we can actually support their needs. So in response, we recently finished a trial in partnership with Smart Recovery, one of the biggest addiction peer support organisations in the world. So this was the first study evaluating Smart's group program for Australian families, and we found really promising results. People valued the treatment and spoke about the difference that it had made to their lives. So we'll also be conducting the first large-scale national survey of affected families. I aim to find out just what it's like to care for someone with drug use in Australia, what support that families might have accessed, and any barriers that they found in getting help. We'll also be looking not just at the challenges, but asking about their coping strategies and the role of resilience, the personal strengths that I see in the families that I work with. So this research will paint a picture of affected families in Australia and will help develop treatment for families through ongoing collaborations with addiction services. Affected families have endured stigma and burden and have been left out of the conversation. It's about time they were listened to, respected, and supported as a population in their own right.
Thank you, Claire. I'd now like to invite Professor Honglin Chen to ask a question.
Thank you, Claire, for sharing your passion for the topic of substance use and its impact on families. And that's a wonderful presentation. Given the critical importance of addressing the needs of families affected by substance use, how might you integrate your research findings into training programs to educate and prepare future psychologists to effectively support these families?
Thank you for the question, Professor Chen. I think it's a really important part of this, and I think the whole idea of turning this research I'm doing into really kind of clear outcomes for the people who are affected is a really key part of the work that I'm doing at the moment. And I think at the moment, one thing you highlighted yourself there is that there is just not enough research out there. We really don't know a lot about this population. And so the first kind of step as far as my research here is to do a large scale survey of the affected families in Australia, just to get a better idea of their experience, and also looking at what help they might have tried to seek, whether they're even aware of any treatment or support that's out there. And if they did access that support, what was their experience of it? And I think once we have the answers to some of those questions, we're going to be able to start thinking about and working with families around how to best design services that are going to meet their specific needs. And while we're talking about quite a general population here, I think it is such a large population that there are going to be very different needs within that group. So whether it's different drugs that are being used or different groups within the community, I think we have to address them where they're at with the needs that they've got in that moment. So I think hopefully we'll learn from this next survey that we're going to be doing just a little bit more about those specific needs, and as I say, be able to tailor a bit more treatment to suit those specific populations.
Thank you. That's brilliant.
Thank you, Claire and Hong Lin. That was Claire, our fourth contestant from the Faculty of the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. Up next is Randa Sassadin. Trained as a lawyer and with a passion for storytelling, Randa's PhD unpacks the dominant and influential narratives of the law of the sea. With a critical eye, she unravels the assumptions embedded within these narratives, which go unquestioned and which emerge as legal and social norms. Randa's goal is to advocate for the oceans, people, and marine life through storytelling to bring about equitable, holistic, and inclusive approaches to ocean governance. Randa will present Ocean Stories for Ocean Governance.
Hello, my name is Randa. I live on Dharawal country, and my heritage originates in a place called Kemet. You might know it as ancient Egypt. My PhD is titled Ocean Stories for Ocean Governance. It is about engaging the wisdom of storytelling into decision-making. I ask, what are the dominant and influential narratives in the law of the sea, and are they sufficient to sustain us in a rapidly changing world? I'm going to tell you about my methodology and the impact of my research by demonstration. Storytelling is the method, and it is story that generates impact. So, over 500 years ago, there was once a pope who thought it was appropriate to draw a line down the middle of the world and allocate everything to the east to Portugal and everything to the west to Spain. This legal fiction changed the world. Today, Spanish is the second most spoken language, but I cannot tell you how many indigenous languages it replaced. About 115 years later, a brave and daring captain named Jacob seized a Portuguese vessel. It was laden with goods, spices, materials fit for royalty. Unsurprisingly, it was taken by force, and the Portuguese wanted it back. It started a war. So Captain Jacob called on his cousin, Hugo Grotius. Hugo happened to be a teenage prodigy and a lawyer. In his defense, Hugo argued for freedom of the seas, freedom of navigation, and freedom of trade for all nations. So revolutionary were his ideas that he had to publish anonymously and then argue against his own work. But his work changed the world again. Today, there are 169 parties to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which codifies the principles of Hugo Grotius' work. This might sound like a happy ending. However, in a world that is much more than just nation states, there are many more ocean stories to be heard. There are stories of creation that start in the deep sea. There are stories of epic migration of species. There are stories of fearless navigation across the Pacific. And there are stories of land where there is now sea. The law tells stories, but it does so in a policed way, under the law, according to evidentiary procedures and in a particular forums. And so, if the law is policing stories, then we need to ask ourselves, what story is the law telling? If the law of the sea is not telling the story of all sentient beings and how we are to live in harmony with each other and our ocean planet, then we must engage the wisdom of storytelling in decision-making to make those stories heard. Ocean Stories for Ocean Governance. Tell me a story about you.
Fantastic work, Randa. I'd now like to invite Professor Nina Reynolds to ask a question.
Yep, I'm on camera. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Randa, for that interesting presentation. So my question is, what important lessons would you say about ocean governance? What would be the one thing you would want people to take away from your PhD?
Thank you, Professor Reynolds, for your question. The one thing I would like people to take away from my PhD is to realize the impact of narratives and how we can make space for other perspectives and knowledges through the narrative process. For example, we may have heard the recent debates around seabed mining. Should we or should we not mine the seabed? It's not just that it's a debate about science or economics, but humans have a relationship with the ocean. And for instance, many cultures, Pacific Islands, coastal and indigenous communities, have long held ancestral ties and spiritual attachments to the sea. But we need to ask whether the narratives within the law of the sea are making space for those stories and for those knowledges to be heard. And if not, then I suggest that incorporating storytelling into this decision-making process itself is the device that can better connect us to the diverse knowledges and perspectives that exist.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting.
Thank you so much, Randa. That was Randa Sassadin from the Faculty of Business and Law. Up next is Suukshan Marks. Suukshan is a double graduate in chemistry from Sri Lanka. Her strong interest in materials research led her to pursue a master's degree in biofabrication at the University of Wollongong, which she completed in 2020. Continuing her passion, currently she is a PhD candidate at the Australian Institute of Innovative Materials and will today present her work on remotely activated contactless electrode for biomedical applications.
Do you ever think of your body as a portable electrical circuit or a device? Well, it kind of is. Because every physiological function of your body is operating on bioelectrical impulses and currents. So when these electrical signals trigger improperly, current medical intervention is to treat it with drugs. This would come with a lot of side effects, and also it could not be effective, especially in the case of neural diseases. This is exactly why electroceuticals are a much needed option. With electroceuticals, we could stimulate or inhibit the malfunctioning neural pathway with a tiny electrode to restore it. This would have less or no side effects at all. On top of that, if we can identify the neural pathways which connects major organs, there is a possibility of treating whole range of common diseases with much efficacy. However, to unlock the true potential of electroceuticals, one of the key considerations is how we're going to deliver these electrical signals into our body. So we have to develop electrodes which could deliver these electrical signals precisely when we want it, wherever we want it. Current electrical stimulation strategies requires wires and batteries, which is a major limitation. So in my research, I am trying to introduce a new wireless stimulation approach. It's called magnetoelectricity. As you can see in the diagram, magnetoelectricity is generated from a composite material which has two separate parts. One is piezoelectric part, which means when you apply a strain to this material, it generates electricity. The other part is magnetostrictive part, which means when you apply a magnetic field, it generates a strain. Now, imagine combining these two together and then applying a magnetic field. So the magnetostrictive part will generate strain, which would transfer to the piezoelectric layer, which would generate electricity. No wires, no batteries needed. Only a magnetic field, which is clinically proven to be very safe, just as an MRI scan. Surprisingly, this amazing phenomena hasn't been used in biomedical applications so far, because most of the studies on this topic have done only in air. So our motivation was to see if the magnetoelectricity works in liquid and also to quantify it. We successfully demonstrated the magnetoelectric effect in liquid, and the voltage output it generates in liquid is quite low compared to in air, but adequate enough to stimulate cells. Furthermore, I looked at the electrochemical parameters of these devices to characterize as a wireless electrode. Finally, as a proof of concept, we assemble these magnetoelectric devices to direct stimulate the living cells. So all this work combined, we hope this would provide the groundwork on magnetoelectricity to turn a new page on electroceutical world.
Thank you so much, Suukshan. I'd now like to invite Alex Taylor-Bartels to ask a question for Suukshan.
G'day. Yeah, thanks, Suukshan. Great presentation, and sounds pretty mind-blowing. That's probably not a pun, but if it is, pardon it. My question is, so what is the purpose of this research? Is it for commercial applications, or is it for sort of just general knowledge? Yeah, that's my question.
So the main purpose would be, the envisaged application would be to use it as in biomedical application, mainly as a wireless implant. So if I elaborate it a little bit more, we could use it in electroceutical world to wirelessly stimulate nerve cells for biomedical application. This would have a large effect on neural diseases like Parkinson, which current drug treatment are not very effective. So this is mainly envisaged to use in electroceuticals in wireless stimulation applications. That is the main purpose of this research.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Suukshan, for that. Contestant number 6 from the Australian Institute of Innovative Materials. Next up is Jiny Joseph. Jiny completed her bachelor's and master's in physics from India and moved to Wollongong in 2020. She's now a final year PhD student at the Australian Institute of Innovative Materials. Her current work is focused on optimizing the synthesis parameters for lead-free relaxor ferroelectrics for applications in ceramic capacitors. Jiny will present lead-free dielectrics for electrical energy storage.
Just imagine if you wake up one day and see that all your electronic devices have stopped working. No lights, no microwave oven, or even worse, no mobile phones. That would be awful, right? Of all the different forms of energy we use, we are currently so bound with electrical energy and electronic device that we cannot imagine a single day without any of it. All the technological advancements in electronic industry have been possible because we mastered the art of designing materials, optimizing its properties, and fabricating devices catering to different requirements. If you have ever opened an electronic circuit, you would have seen many thousand devices integrated on it. Diodes, capacitors, transistors are just some among them. Some of the leading concerns in electronic industry include the elimination of the toxic element lead from these devices. Lead is known to possess some significant properties, but it comes at the expense of the health and well-being of living beings and the ecosystem. With the ongoing trend in miniaturization and the increasing demand for electronic chips in the market, we are seeing a projected rise in manufacturing. It's high time we address the increased power consumption in factories. Also, many of these devices require metal electrodes as conducting elements. The choice of metals like platinum or palladium will significantly determine the total cost per device. So what can we do about all of this? It has been found that lead can be suitably replaced by bismuth. This will reduce toxicity while maintaining comparable characteristics. Certain ceramic devices require high temperature treatment to obtain a pure phase. By chemical modification, the required temperature can be lowered, hence reducing the runtime and power consumed in manufacturing. In terms of cost, we always have the option to switch to cheaper earth-abundant metals as electrodes. As a research student in material science, I've been working on ferroelectric materials, which is considered ideal for electrical energy storage. In my work, I modified a ferroelectric material with bismuth oxide. This gave a lead-free composition with excellent energy storage performance. With the use of bismuth, I could lower the synthesis temperature by almost 300 degrees Celsius. With the relatively low synthesis temperature, this composition could be co-fired with metals like silver and copper. With the stable performance, this composition is considered ideal for dielectric layer in multi-layered ceramic capacitors. These are inevitable in almost every electrical circuit we personally have. With the lower synthesis temperature and the use of cheap metal electrodes, we ensure cost efficiency and power efficiency in large-scale manufacturing. My work on lead-free material is expected to provide a good paradigm on ceramic capacitor fabrication.
Thank you very much, Jiny. I'd now like to invite Sarah Vogel to ask a question.
Hi, Jiny. That was very informative and very physicsy, which I like. My question was, what drove you to pick bismuth oxide as your replacement for lead? Was that like a long process, or was it kind of like something that was in literature? And you mentioned that there are other cheaper metals that we could use. What other metals are there out that could be an alternative to bismuth?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Sarah, for the question. And with that, I would say bismuth oxide was chosen because it is got some low melting temperature, which is ideal for reducing the synthesis temperature. When compared to lead-based compositions, it requires high temperatures of the range of above 1000 degrees Celsius. By using bismuth oxide, which has a low melting point of 800 degrees Celsius, I could reduce the overall synthesis temperature. And bismuth is used as a replacement for lead because of its electronic configuration, which is comparable when compared to lead. And in terms of metal electrodes, that comes as a different point. Bismuth is a bismuth contributes to the dielectric properties. And when it comes to the cheaper metals, I'm considering the metal electrodes used in a capacitor. So the dielectric layer in between is my material, and the metals used will be copper or silver, which is considerably cheaper than palladium and platinum, which is considered expensive. Hope that makes sense.
Fantastic answer to a fantastic question. Thank you very much for that. That was Jiny Joseph from the Australian Institute of Innovative Materials. Our next contestant is Yue Sun. Yue is in her fourth year of her doctoral degree. Her research focuses on the interaction between individuals and their working environments, specifically examining person-organization fit and misfit. After dedicating several years to theoretical studies, she is now prepared to delve into the application of these theories within the context of Eastern culture. Yue will present Stop Comparing Apples and Oranges. What is this thing called person-organization fit in China?
I love my parents just like you do. Imagine, today I'm going to break it down just to know how much you love your parents. You know, in the West, you've got the love language thing going on, where people say, I love you, to express their affection. But in the East, we do things differently. We express our affection by act of service. So if you were to calculate how much I love my parents by calculating how many times I told them I love you. Bang, that will be 0. So the same mix-up happened in the studies of person-organization fit, which is my research topic. Western scholars usually see person-organization fit as whether employees' values, culture, goals, and norms match those of the organization. Considering cultural differences, they might have huge impact on employees' perception about person-organization fit. So we can't help but doubt that if the thing that important to employees working in Western countries hold the same way to employees working in the Eastern context. Guess what? In the past few months, we have completed our systematic review, where we screamed out 200 papers published in high-ranking Chinese journal. We surprisingly found out that over half, 106 papers, adopting Western measurement. It's like trying to compare apples to oranges. I know it's common for scholars from different cultural backgrounds try to adopt popular and identical measuring scale, but it only works if Chinese employees see value, culture, goals, and norm the same way. But you can tell, even from the very beginning of this presentation, we are on completely different page. So my empirical research will figure out how Chinese make sense of person-organization fit in the context of Chinese organization. We are going to ask participants born and raised in China, speaking Mandarin as their first language, do you agree or disagree on some popular person-organization fit measuring item? If their answer is yes, and then we will ask them, could you please interpret on your own language? And also they need to give at least one example to back up their interpretation. This research will revolutionize the research game by putting an end to the phenomenon that researchers adopt identical measuring items regardless of cultural differences. This research will also help Chinese organizations have major insight into what their employees really think about person-organization fit. This is Yu Wei. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Yu Wei. I'd now like to invite back Professor Patricia Davidson to ask a question for Yu Wei.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for the presentation. I really love your perspective on cultural diversity. What are the application challenges would you see in sort of implementing this model, say in organizations and organizational psychology?
So when I started doing person-organization fit, I tried to talk to some of my friends who is also doing PhD, but in China. But then there was like, oh, that was an interesting topic, but I don't think that really matters. So I was like, maybe when we talk about person-organization fit, it probably refers to different things in Western countries and also in China. So because nowadays we want to solve the things about job hopper and decrease the turnover rate. So from the perspective of human resource management, we think that increasing the person-organization fit would be a key issue to tackle the problems. So I think at some stage we need to measure the person-organization fit in China. But they keep on using identical scale in Western studies. But that doesn't make sense because people in China couldn't understand those scales.
That's an excellent answer, and I look forward to seeing how your work evolves. Congratulations.
Thank you, Professor Patricia.
Great work, Yu Wei. That was Yu Wei Sun from the Faculty of Business and Law. Our next contestant is Cassandra Ng. Cassandra is an accredited practicing dietitian. She graduated in 2018 with a Bachelor of Nutrition and Dietetics with honours and as a Dean Scholar. and is currently in the third year of her PhD. Cassandra also currently works in private practice once per week. Cassandra's research explores nut consumption in Australia and the relationship between nut consumption and body weight, including the energy regulating mechanisms of tree nuts and peanuts. Cassandra will present Cracking the Code: Will Eating Nuts Lead to Weight Gain?
Have you ever heard that eating nuts will make you gain weight? It's really conflicting, right? Because nuts are supposed to be healthy, but aren't they full of fat? And while I'm asking questions, do you look at the nutrition information when you buy food? And how does this influence what you buy? Many people, including health professionals, are concerned that eating nuts can lead to weight gain. Now, it is true that nuts are high in fats, but research tells us there's actually no association between nut intake and weight gain. A handful of nuts every day can improve our health, but nut consumption levels are substantially lower than recommended. So how can we encourage people to eat nuts more regularly and assure them that they won't risk weight gain by doing so? Well, the aim of my research is to explore the energy regulating mechanisms of nuts. That is, the properties of nuts that help us to manage our overall energy intake. I'm also exploring a better way of presenting nutrition information on food labels to see how that might affect nut consumption. Here's what I found so far. First, our bodies don't absorb all of the energy that nuts provide. Remember when I said that nuts were high in fats? Well, it turns out that a portion of these fats are physically trapped inside cell walls, keeping that energy locked away and inaccessible to our digestive system. Second, I found that when people eat nuts on their own as a snack, they're likely to consume less energy at their next meal. For example, if you had a handful of cashews at morning tea, then your lunch is probably going to be lighter than it usually would be. This appetite suppressing effect might make nuts a fantastic tool in weight management. Once I understood these mechanisms, I examined data from the Australian Health Survey, which tells us all about what Australians eat and drink. I saw that energy coming from nuts was significantly lower when we accounted for the fats trapped within cell walls. And I also found that the majority of nuts were actually being eaten with other foods rather than alone. This is important because we know that people tend to eat less at later meals after eating nuts on their own. Now that I know how nuts can help us manage our overall energy intake, the next step is to understand what people think about this. I'm conducting surveys and focus groups to understand whether improved labelling of energy content would encourage people to eat more nuts. The first option is how energy content is currently estimated, but this system doesn't communicate how much energy is actually absorbed by the body, which is shown in the second option. My research could bust the myth that nuts are a fattening food, while also acting as a case study for how the energy content of foods could be better presented on food labels.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. I'd now like to invite Professor David Caro back to ask a question.
Thanks, Cassandra. Fantastic presentation. Love nuts, so you've made me feel much better already. As we think about this, how receptive is industry going to be to changing how we label energy consumption in energy availability of food? Food labeling has been so contentious over the years.
Yeah, thanks very much, Professor David Caro, for your question. And it's a really good question. I guess at the moment, I'm up to my focus groups, and I will be talking to people in the food regulation space to see how feasible this is. I guess I would see my research as acting as a case study for other foods to have similar research conducted so that the labels, the energy content that's shown on labels, we can update that system for all foods, not just nuts.
Wonderful work. I'm really excited to see where it goes. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was Cassandra Ng from the Faculty of Science, Medicine and Health. Up next is our final candidate, Renji Jung from the Faculty of the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. Renji has an honours degree in history and is currently a PhD candidate whose research topic is about the influence of the new culture movement on the Chinese diaspora in Australia from the 1900s to the 1930s. His PhD investigates how the Chinese community was shaped by Australian racism and Chinese intellectual debates. Renji will present racism, nationalism, and the formation of a Chinese Australian community 1900s to 1930s.
Several years ago, before the pandemic, Australia had been rocked by the allegations that China had been engaged in the foreign influence activities in Australia. Some people feel that the Chinese government was extending its influence, which might lead to the undermining of the country's democratic values. This concern is not, in fact, altogether new in Australian history. 100 years ago, a similar situation confronted Chinese people here. A large influx of Chinese migrants and an Australian racialist backlash combined to create a fear of yellow peril. Questions were raised as to whether Chinese migrants were a threat to the country's stability and its Christian values. This concern culminated in the White Australian policy that was brought in after Federation. The policy, of course, prevented more Chinese from entering Australia. But what about the Chinese who had already settled here? In my research, I focus on the Chinese language publications to trace how they reacted to the social pressure in Australia. Since the gold rush in the 1850s, the Chinese community had suffered discrimination and restrictions. Their community leaders played an important role in the protest to improve their situation. In the two political booklets published in the late 19th century, the Chinese Questions and Remonstrance to the Parliament and the People of Victoria, leading Chinese figures condemned the double standard on the principle of equality. They claimed that the self-evident truth that all men are created equal was not practiced in Australia. However, they had to face further restriction brought by the Immigration Restriction Act in 1901. As a result, their ideology turned to nationalism. There were Chinese leaders in Sydney making the constitutional reform of the Qing dynasty in China, and the Melbourne Chinese leaders supporting the Republican Revolution led by Sun Yat-sen. I have found that both of the Chinese language newspapers published in the two cities quoted the theory of Wang Jingwei, a revolutionary leader who emphasized that all Chinese belonged to one group, sharing common history, culture, language, and blood. Over a century ago, the White Australian policy forced Chinese Australian leaders to abandon their earlier hopes of inter-ethnic equality and liberalism. They turned to promote nationalism when they faced social pressure in Australia. This may be also happening in today's circumstance.
Thank you very, very much, Renji. I'd now like to invite back Professor Simon Moss to ask a question.
Yeah, thanks, Renji. Yeah, it's just so intriguing to think about the effects of the White Australian policy on these ideologies. But what do you think were the effects or the impact of this sort of nationalistic ideology of the Chinese community, on the community and on Australia at large? How do you think it sort of changed the behaviour and maybe even the success of the community?
Thanks very much. Well, I think this just give them the reason, just give them give them the ability for the Chinese leaders to mobilize their communities, and there are many groups in Chinese Australian communities, and from different places from China, and with different religious beliefs and kind of political backgrounds, and all these leaders also they had their own kind of personal or business interest, and they just use these nationalist, kind of nationalist reasons as a kind of, to force to mobilize their community to, to unite the community to fight for their the Chinese interest in Australia, also to maintain their own leadership, something like that.
Yeah, no, excellent. Thank you. That makes sense.
Thank you very much, Renji. And Renji from the Faculty of the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities. This concludes the finalist presentations for today. The judges will now move to a separate Zoom meeting to deliberate the overall winner and the runner-up. Now, for everybody watching, the People's Choice Award is officially open. To vote, simply open your camera on your phone and hold it over the QR code, which should be on the screen now. You will be prompted to go to a Qualtrics survey where each person will have one opportunity to vote for the finalist that you believe gave the most convincing and most engaging 3MT presentation based on your understanding of the judging of the judging criteria. Now, this afternoon is a celebration of talents that we have here at UOW, and don't be concerned that QR code is still for the People's Choice Award. While the judging panel is finalising their deliberations, a recorded performance by Master of Philosophy candidate Alex Young will play. The sparse yet distinctive haunting sounds of Alex's new hybrid instrument, the slide piano, stimulated the initial inspiration for this performance and is an integral feature of his work. There is an extraordinary richness and depth derived from this innovative new instrument that resonates on a very visceral level. Here is Alex's own composition, Lux Nocturna. The People's Choice Survey will remain open until the end of this musical piece, so please continue to submit your vote. Welcome back, everybody. That was Alex Young's composition of Lux Nocturna. So Alex, thank you so much for contributing to this event and all the best with your Master of Philosophy. The People's Choice Award has now closed. Thank you everybody for voting. The judges have returned and we are about to find out the winner of the 2023 UOW 3MT final. Before we announce the winners, I would like to take a very quick moment on behalf of everybody who helped organise this event to personally thank the judging panel for their contribution. I would also like to thank the 10 finalists for their hard work that they've put into this event and for their valued contributions to the world of higher degree research. Congratulations to all of you. Thank you so much for taking part in this year's 3MT competition. It's now my pleasure to welcome Professor Simon Moss to say a few words and to announce the winner of the People's Choice Award.
Thank you, Emily. For some reason, my video is not working, so you might have to just look at a static picture of me. But, oh, I can do it now. Great. Thank you. So, yeah, just before I announce, I should say that if I was asked to either perform the 3MT or to juggle 10 knives with my eyes closed, I think I'd choose the knives because the 3MT is just, it's impossible. Speakers need to summarize basically a thesis that would normally be about 80,000 words in 500 words while inserting interesting anecdotes, describing challenging concepts, talking about the innovation of their work while speaking eloquently and engagingly. So it's very difficult. So somehow I think that all 10 contestants greatly fulfilled this almost impossible task. So I was so excited and to be honest, even surprised at the amazing quality of these presentations. But despite many deserving candidates, we're ready to announce the People's Choice Award. And let me just see. And the People's Choice Award is for today is Yuween's son. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Simon. Thank you. Can I say something about it?
Absolutely, that would be fantastic.
So thank you for people who supported me. And I think I can see my parents online. Thank you for your support. I feel like if today I didn't want any thing, I'm still very grateful for attending this event. Because before 3-minute thesis, I'm struggling to just tell people what is my research topic, even though just explaining what is person organization fit for people in China, I feel really like struggling. But now I can explain them very succinct and especially in 3 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic, Yue. Congratulations on winning the People's Choice Award and for that speech as well. I would now like to welcome Professor David Caro to introduce this year's runners-up.
Thanks so much, Emily, and thanks for being such a wonderful compere today. You've done a fantastic job. To paraphrase very badly, when President Richard Nixon was asked to speak, he said, if you want me to speak for an hour, give me an hour's notice. If you want me to speak for 5 minutes, give me 6 months' notice. And so to echo Simon's words this afternoon, you have done a fantastic job in distilling down incredibly complex concepts into bite-sized pieces that really make sense to an audience with no background in each of your areas. Congratulations to everyone. The judging panel had a particularly difficult time. Scores were high for absolutely everyone across the board, and you are all winners. You are all doing the most amazing work. I love the diversity of what we've heard this afternoon. I love the complexity of it. And I love the fact that so many of the theses that will come out of this are going to make a difference in the world in which we live. Congratulations to everyone. But this afternoon's runner-up is Cassandra. Cracking the Code, Will Eating Nuts Lead to Weight Gain? Congratulations, Cassandra, richly deserved.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm a bit speechless. Let me just capture something quickly. Sorry, I've got a friend in the office who's also, can you turn that down a little bit? Sorry, just to stop the double voice coming through. Yeah, what a surprise. I'm sure it was a very difficult decision for the judges. I enjoyed everyone's videos so much. Yeah, I think I want to thank everyone who organized this, thank the judges as well, and my supervisors, Liz, Yasmin, and Yen. You know, without them, I wouldn't be able to do this work. So special thanks to them, and to Anouk as well, who helped me put together my video. I couldn't have done that without him. So thanks, everyone.
And just remember that fine champagne is a very good accompaniment for cashews. Celebrate tonight.
Excellent advice. Thank you, Professor Caro, and congratulations, Cassandra. Very, very well deserved. We would now like to invite Professor Patricia Davidson, who will announce the overall winner of the 2023 UOW Three-Minute Thesis Final.
Well, what a great session it has been this afternoon. Just a truly amazing array of presentations, the diversity. It has just been really a great honour. And it is my pleasure to announce that our winner for this year is Molly Kirkpatrick from the Faculty of Engineering and Information Sciences.
Oh my gosh. Wow, like Cassandra, I'm very speechless. Wow, thank you. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Thank you to all of the judges. I don't envy your task. I truly enjoyed watching everybody's videos and thought they were fascinating. And I love hearing about the huge range of research that we're doing here at the uni. Yeah, thanks to the organizers and for everybody coming along and watching us and supporting us. And yeah, a big congratulations to all of the other participants as well. This is not easy by any means to condense, you know, your many years of work down into a couple minutes. So yeah, big congratulations to everybody, and thank you very much.
Great job. And also a very sincere thanks to HISATA for sponsoring today's session. I know all of our doctoral students know that that money is really important to just help you get to conferences, sometimes just to eat. Thank you again to our sponsors, and what a wonderful session. And thank you so much to Emily and Simon for giving us such a really great session today. Such a range of presentations, such variety, and I'm incredibly proud of all of our amazing students, and thanks to the supervisors and the staff that support them.
Thank you very much, VC. That's very kind of you to say. Congratulations, Molly. I absolutely loved your presentation, and I'm so glad that you did decide to participate in this. I know it was a bit up in the air when we were first talking about it, what seems like a very, very long time ago now. But I'm pretty glad you did decide to go in it. So congratulations. And we will be in touch to send you off to represent UOW at the Asia Pacific final in the coming days. We are about to wrap up today's proceedings, but before I do, I just want to say a few thanks. Firstly, to the VC and DVC, Professor David Caro. I really, really appreciate you spending your time. I know it's quite difficult given you're all so busy, but it's great to see you here supporting HDR research. I'm very, very appreciative of you being here. I trust everybody had a great oh, sorry. Oh, good. Okay. I trust everybody here had a great afternoon watching and supporting these phenomenal presentations by our finalists. It does take a village to put together something like 3MT. So there are a couple of people that I would particularly like to thank. Firstly, Anthony Watering, who, while racing to submit his own PhD thesis, has made time to keep this event going. Secondly, to Emma O'Flynn for working so tirelessly behind the scenes and for getting stuck into anything and everything that I've asked that's needed to be done. I can confidently say that without Anthony and Emma, this event would not have happened. So thank you both. To Dr. Linda Hodson and Russell Walton from the Learning and Development Unit for running our training programs or running our training workshops and providing feedback in the practice run to our finalists. Our faculty associate deans of higher degree research for organising and running such fantastic faculty heats, and of course the strategic marketing unit for helping to promote this 3MT event. I'd also like to extend my sincere thanks to the Graduate Research School, in particular Hong Lin Chen and Simon Moss, for their unwavering support, good ideas, for making themselves available, and most importantly, supporting our HDR candidates. Your generosity and kindness has and is been much appreciated. And we would like to thank you, our audience, for joining us this afternoon and supporting our presenters, and not least of all, but HySADA for sponsoring this event. Like we mentioned, we couldn't have done this without you, and we are very, very grateful for your support. That officially ends today's 3MT competition. I wish you all a great evening. Go the Matildas, and we look forward to seeing you all again next year.